Gopi Jana Vallabh.
Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Shlotra Shri Srimad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavadi Ki Jai. Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Gaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gokupinath Shamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Jamuna Devi Ganga Devi Ki Jai. Sambeta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glorious to the Assembled Devotees. All glorious to the Assembled Devotees. All glorious to the Assembled Devotees. Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Reading from the Bhagavad Gita, because it was sitting here. And reading from the second chapter, verse number 72. Oh, excuse me. I'm going to read from verse number 70. Puri, oh yeah? Okay. Well, so far I'm doing okay. Puryamana machala pratishtam samudram apa pravashanti yadvat tadvat kama yam pravashanti sarave sashantam apnoti nakama kami apuryamanam, always being filled. Achala pratishnam, steadily situated. Samudram, the ocean. Waters. Pravishanti, enter. Yadva, as. Tadva, so. Kama, desires. Yam, unto whom. Pravishanti, enter. Sarve, all. Sa, that person. Shantim, peace. Apnoti, achieves. Not. Kami, one who desires to fulfill desires. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. Although the vast ocean, is always filled with water, it is always, especially during the rainy season, being filled with much more water. But the ocean remains the same, steady. It is not agitated, nor does it cross beyond the limit of its brink. That is also true of a person fixed in Krishna consciousness. As long as one has the material body, the demands of the body for sense gratification will continue. The devotee, however, is not disturbed by such desires because of his fullness. A Krishna conscious man is not in need of anything because the Lord fulfills all his material necessities. Therefore, he is like the ocean, always full in himself. Desires may come to him like the waters of the rivers that flow into the ocean, but he is steady in his activities, and he is not even slightly disturbed by desires for sense gratification. That is the proof of a Krishna conscious man, one who has lost all inclinations for sense gratification, although the desires are present. Because he remains satisfied in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, he can remain steady like the ocean and therefore enjoy full peace. Others, however, who want to fulfill desires even up to the limit of liberation, what to speak of material success, never attain peace. The fruit of workers, the salvationists, and also the yogis who are after mystic powers are all unhappy because of unfulfilled desires. But the person in Krishna consciousness is happy in the service of the Lord, and he has no desires to be fulfilled. In fact, he does not even desire liberation from the so-called material bondage. The devotees of Krishna have no material desires, and therefore they are in perfect peace. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chaturunmilitam Nena Tasya Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Govinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It's a great honor, pleasure to be here in your ashram. It's very clean and nice. And it's it's important to find a space where you can be fully concentrated in your practice of Krishna consciousness, so that you can experience this type of fullness that Prabhupada's mentioning. And as Prabhupada says in his purport, as long as we have a material body, there will be the experience of the material body, because it's part of the Mahatattva. All the ingredients that are there in the universe are there in the body, including the mind, which comes from pradhana, the original substance from which, after being agitated by the glance of Mahavishnu and infused with time, energy, and karma, and the perverted desire for enjoyment in the material world of the living entities, it divides by the modes of nature into various sections. And then those expand into the senses, which are intimately connected with the material world. And as soon as one's facilitation of connection with the material world is complete, then the body is part of the Mahatattva. And then when we're inside the body, we'll definitely experience the changes that take place in the material world, not the least of which is attraction to sense objects, which Hamsa Avatar says in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is inevitable, since the senses are tied to their sense objects. They're embedded, he says. As soon as the baby comes out of the womb, then there's a way in which his senses become extended into the sense objects. It's automatic. So in the process of cultivating Krishna consciousness, one has to experience a higher taste, which means that the experience that we're getting from Krishna consciousness is obviously superior to us. And therefore, the sense control of the devotee is genuine. It's not artificial, as Krishna says elsewhere in the Bhagavad Gita, Vishaya vinivartante nirahara siddhina rasavarjam rasopyasya param jushva nivartate. That in the beginning, one may restrain the senses, and there may be a sense that I'm still attached, and it's there within the mind, that I understand the sense object is there. But when one experiences a higher taste, which is natural for us because we're a superior energy, then the idea of sense gratification seems ludicrous. It's not something that the Krishna conscious person entertains or is attracted to, because such a person has something superior. For instance, if you have a meal which is prepared love and devotion, offered to the Lord, and it's tasty, and then you have the choice of eating what termites eat, which is a piece of wood. For some reason they enjoy that. Their bodies are designed to eat wood. And you say, which would you like? That you're just compelled to take that which is naturally superior. So Krishna consciousness is not about artificial restraint, nor is there a militant competition against the senses, but it's a cultivation of a higher sense of pleasure, which is quite natural and which is achievable by applying oneself to the practice of Krishna consciousness. So once that's in place, one can interact with the world without danger. Of course, everyone has to be careful. We read that in the 3rd canto over in Vrindavan. Prabhupada said you have to engage in Krishna consciousness seriously, and he said you also have to be careful and not assume that I'm over the disease completely to be attracted to the sense objects. One should not tempt fate or think one's entitled or think I'm liberated. We should always think I'm not liberated. Therefore, I can't cut corners. And if you stay on the safe side and remain humble and think that at any moment I can be overcome by the powerful waves of sense gratification, and you cultivate a higher taste for Krishna consciousness, becomes one can stay in that position even up to the time when we leave this material body and be attracted to the form of Krishna, to the name of Krishna, and not to anything in the material world. That's important because we are given a certain amount of time in this life. We have an ayu, time span, and when it runs out, then there's some excuse why the body gets vanquished. When it's over, then one has to be ready for the test, the final test, Ante Narayana Smriti, which is the beginning admonition of Shukadeva Goswami for everyone, that you should be ready at the time of death to remember God. So you have to practice it throughout lifetime, in all circumstances, to remain conscious of Krishna while navigating the material world. And one should try to have that superior taste for Krishna, be attracted to the deities and not to the forms of the material world, which are so prevalent. Prabhupada notes that people advertise by putting forward the illusory forms of the physical body, especially the female form. If you walk through an airport, you'll see most of the images there are women or women with men, and the idea is that the senses are naturally attracted there. But for a person who's become attracted to the beauty of Madan Mohan, which means Madan Mohan means the one who conquers Cupid. Everyone's captured by Cupid in this world. And when one becomes attracted to Madan Mohan, the idea is that one can do the impossible, which is to rise above the attraction of Cupid. The idea that I'll be happy in the material world if I can find my counterpart here, and we'll live together in bliss. But one can much more practically attach oneself to Madan Mohan, the beautiful form of the Lord, and also experience the form, qualities of the Lord in his name. Iti murtyabhidanena mantra murtim murtikam yajite yagya purusha sasamya darshanam puman. By learning to be attracted to the holy name of the Lord, to the exclusion of everything else, one starts to develop a sense that I feel satisfied just by hearing Krishna's name, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, seeing the deity. I don't like to eat anything that's not prasadam. I don't like to hear anything that's not Krishna Katha. Not interested in politics. I don't want to hear mundane music. Or if one does incidentally hear these things, one's mind naturally translates it into Krishna, because a Krishna conscious person sees Krishna everywhere. If he sees the forms of this material world, he then remembers the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, that the external form is superfluous. Or if he hears a song that's about some mundane subject, he or she interprets it as, oh yeah, that's something from Bhagavad Gita. I remember I was doing book distribution in the UK, and I was in a little village, and I stepped near the shop, and they had music playing, and it was, I think, some metal band or a punk band or something, and it was one of the refrains of the song was "Never surrender." Never surrender when you're up against the wall. It had these lyrics. I can't remember exactly who sang it or whatever, but I just remember noting it. And another time I heard a song where the famous singer was saying, "You are everything and everything is you." And obviously it was meant for, well, I mean, not obviously, I didn't know Diana Ross, or I don't know if she's still alive, but I didn't ask her. Was that about Krishna? But when I heard it, I thought, Oh yeah, of course that's about Krishna. You are everything and everything is you. Somebody might say that about a so-called lover in the material world, but it's ludicrous to a person who's cultivated an appreciation for Bhagavad Gita that Krishna is everywhere and that he's all attractive and that he fulfills all desires. And I don't need some arrangement in the material world to be happy. The external forms are temporary and illusory. He sees beyond it. And therefore, a person who's Krishna conscious, even marginally Krishna conscious, who moves about the material world and is careful, can enact what Krishna describes to Arjuna in the verses after Arjuna asks, what is a symptom of somebody who's enlightened? And Krishna says, Prajahati yadakaman sarvan parthamanogatan atmanyevat manatushta stita pragnas tadochite. Stita pragnas means that such a person is known to be fixed when he or she sees the sense objects of the material world, and then the mind catches on to them and concocts some idea about how I might enjoy it. This is where Krishna describes elsewhere in the Bhagavad Gita, Dayato Vishayan Pumsam. The person looks at the material world, and the process of entanglement is I look at it and I think, oh, maybe I could have that. And that's the beginning where the hook catches the mind. And then the mind starts contemplating, how will I enjoy this? How will I get it? And then throughout the Bhagavatam, we hear, if you grab that, then you're going to be pulled through a whole series of difficulties in the material world, like that's the chapter in the 5th canto, the forest of material enjoyment. Person goes off into the forest, which represents the material world, thinking, I'll get some profit there, and then just gets lost and harassed and is kept up at night, can't sleep, is attacked by animals, is starving, and so forth. That's the experience of the material world. So if one is fortified and knows that on one side, and on the other side, atmanyevat manatushta means that one feels satisfied within one's own self. If I've had this experience that all I need is my sadhana, a little prasadam, some service, and a place to lie down, and I'm happy. I don't need anything else. It's even marginally Krishna conscious. Stita pragnas tadochite. The person's fixed in consciousness, and Maya waves a little flag and said, how about this? It's like, no, I like my thing. Yesterday, I was at a program with devotees, and I was complaining that on one of my Facebook feeds, somebody's dumping all these stupid things I never asked for. So they said, no, you just push these three little buttons, and then say, I'm not interested. Mm-hmm. There's a button that says not interested. Mm-hmm. And I said, we should just put one of those on the material world. And just push the three buttons, and you're like, not interested. That's the declaration of the devotee in this world. That categorically, it's not, I'm interested in this, I'm not interested in that. This is good, that's bad. Categorically, I'm not interested. I'm interested in the source where it all comes from, which makes more sense rather than looking at the reflection. So if one cultivates this simple process of being introspective, chanting japa is a time to examine oneself. Where's my mind going? What am I interested in? Am I able to connect to the holy name? And if one can experience even one time, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Bhaktivinoda Upadesh Ekbar Nam Raso Matode. He said, Ekbar, just one time, try to experience that intoxication that you get from hearing the holy name and resonating and thinking, I am not this body, I'm a servant of Krishna. And if you can get that, then everything else pales in comparison. So therefore, this verse is very relatable because number one, even though we are practicing Krishna consciousness, we may note that the desires may still flow through the mental system. However, by the practice of becoming attracted to Madan Mohan, we'll also notice that we have a not interested button we can push very actively and say, I've got somewhere more important to be. This is intelligence and discrimination, vivek, that even though there are temptations in the material world, we can say, like Haridas Thakur said to the prostitute, sure, no problem, but not now. I'm busy. And one has to stay busy constantly. I feel that renunciation based on that story is always having somewhere better to go. That it comes up. How about you come over to my house? How about you look at this? How about you divert just for a minute and say, yeah, no, later, because right now I'm busy. I have somewhere else to go. And if you can run out your whole life on that excuse and say, I got somewhere better to be. Sorry, I can't make it this time. Justice delayed is justice denied. It's like in those who are expert at avoiding paying legal penalties, they don't try to defeat the case, they just try to delay it. There are people in current zeitgeist of the world who are expert at this. They just delay it. They figure out ways to stall until it no longer applies anymore. So there's statute of limitations, and there are things that extenuating circumstances where you're no longer liable to pay for your sins.
Appeal.
Yeah, you appeal it. You just keep dragging it out. And so this another one of the techniques based on Haridas Thakur. It's like, yeah, no, not right now. I'm busy. I got to finish my rounds. I have to get up in the morning, so I have to take rest. Otherwise, I would. And at the meantime, we're behind the scenes, even though everyone's trying to knock on the door, ring the doorbell, look through the window. We're busy worshiping Madan Mohan. And once we come to that point of seeing the beauty of Madan Mohan, then it doesn't matter who knocks or whatever. It's just like, yeah, no, I'm not into it. And when we come to that point, prajahati yada kaman, sarvam parta manogatam, means the mind is going to go. It's always going, it's always presenting ideas for sense gratification based on past experience. But once we have a superior engagement, then prajahati, I don't feel any connection to it. I don't feel an obligation. I push the I'm not interested button. And it's like, yeah, don't send me those in my feed anymore because I'm not going to look at them. If you've ever seen things come up on social media and you're just like, you just can't relate to it. People are sending me things in Bengali. I think it's coming from Bangladesh somehow. All these memes. I'm like, I can't read the script. I could if I took enough time to look at it, but I'm not interested. So the whole material world becomes like that for a person who gets a taste for Krishna. And one of the ways that we also become fortified is by going out to give Krishna consciousness to others. Because when we read Bhagavad Gita and then go out into the public, or we have programs where we invite people in, we can see the varieties of consciousness that Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita. Ignorant, passionate, good. And the Gita comes alive while we're preaching Krishna consciousness to others. It's a way that we can observe how precise Krishna's instructions are in the Bhagavad Gita. And I've had the experience where when I'm teaching Krishna consciousness to others, introducing people to Krishna conscious literature, and I hear things they're saying or the way they're acting or the way they're dressing or just the way they're presenting themselves, I think, oh, yeah, I don't want to be like that. And the contrast between the way devotees hold themselves in the world, the way they show up, and the way people under the modes of material nature show up becomes a point of comparison. I think, oh, yeah, I'd rather be with the devotees. I want to be like them, clean, simple, transcendental, not engaged in activities that make me look foolish. And it doesn't mean we have to go to a mountaintop. It doesn't mean we have to go to the Himalaya. When we were just in Govardhan and we were having our readings every day, this really nice brahmachari showed up one day and he was saying, I need some service. I said, yeah, just listen, hear and chant. He goes, no, I want service. And next thing I said, well, go ask the devotees over there, they'll help you. And I could see him sweeping, helping, this and that. And then after a couple of days, he revealed, well, I went to the Himalayas. That's where I just came from. And I was there for 3 days. I went there to find a peaceful place where I could just hear and chant. And he said, after a day and a half, I was completely bored. And I realized that my mind was agitating me, even in the most pristine place on the planet with the rarefied atmosphere. He said, I got down here as fast as I could because I heard you're having this reading. And now he wanted service because he felt afraid, actually, that I went to the most peaceful place on earth and I was attacked. And it was attacked by the mind. Okay, now do this, do that. And part of it is a sense of boredom, like, oh, how can I keep chanting? So we're safe when we stay in the service mode, when we stay engaged in the morning program and become fully aware of what we're doing. For instance, when I was just in Vrindavan, I was listening to a talk about these various power centers in the Dham and in devotional service in general. And one of them is the Guru Parampara. And that when we worship the Guru Parampara, we get this inordinate power to go on with our devotional service. And there were other power centers like worshiping Tulsi Devi, and there was Govardhan Hill and so forth. So in the Mangalartis, we'd be singing the prayer and it wouldn't just be rote. But I was thinking, this is the power center. We're singing this to our guru, to the acharyas, and that the power is coming through. And when you think of it like that you're plugged in to a charging station, to a spiritual charging station, and you realize that by superior power, I'll be able to rise above the temptations of the material world and be situated firmly in devotional service. Then it becomes heartfelt when we know what we're doing. And based on that, if we have a foursquare, steady cultivation program, and we're very aware of what we're doing while we're doing it, we can run out the clock here in the material world without being implicated. Just like you're on the field and you just run out the clock while you're ahead. And don't stop the game. You just can't stay in there and keep the vibration going and keep following the simple process that's given by the acharyas. Those are a few introductory remarks, and now why don't we have a discussion? You can ask questions, specific things that you'd like to ask. Do you all have enough oxygen?
If you open the door a little bit, it's 39 degrees.
Your neighbors are congenial with kirtan and
We haven't heard anything yet.
okay, I'm sure they have though.
Well, not so much that they come and let us know.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, those remarks are very introductory, so you can ask anything specific if you want.
Shy guys.
Pardon? Shy?
Shy guys.
Yes, go ahead, some questions.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
One question one problem that I'm struggling with while practicing is being able to use my intelligence instead of my mind to make decisions and planning. How do you become a better planner, and how do you make better use your intelligence instead of your mind and everything in life?
Prabhupada describes the Bhagavad Gita as the Vedic intelligence. In verse 2.235 in the Bhagavatam, in his purport, he says the Bhagavad Gita is the Vedic intelligence. That's the charging station for the intelligence.
really cultivate the Bhagavad Gita. When you hear Krishna's logic in the Bhagavad Gita, when you hear his intelligence, that's God's intelligence. And we're part and parcel of God. And our intelligence is specifically meant for Bhagavad Gita. It fits well. That's why when people read Bhagavad Gita who are a little bit thoughtful, close to the mode of goodness, they'll say, who said this? Where did this come from? And they realize that they can read it over and over again and they feel their intelligence feels satisfied. Steep your intelligence in Bhagavad Gita. Everything there will give your intelligence, will empower your intelligence to have vivek, or discrimination about what's good and what's not good. And when you strengthen your intelligence by worshiping the Bhagavad Gita with your intelligence, by listening to it, and use your God-given human intelligence just to think about Bhagavad Gita and consider what Krishna is saying, then you get fortified. Your intelligence gets fortified and it becomes stronger and stronger. So that's the place, that's the gym to take your intelligence to, is the Bhagavad Gita. Get really absorbed in it. In one place, Prabhu said, cram Bhagavad Gita. Everybody knows how to cram if you've been in modern education. So he said, cram Bhagavad Gita. That's the way to develop your intelligence. Just hook it up. And whatever situation comes up, whatever concern you have, consult Bhagavad Gita. And then you can consult those who have also lived the Bhagavad Gita, and you can say, ask the question, how to interpret what Krishna is saying, or how to apply what Krishna is saying in the Bhagavad Gita. And also, just trying to feel the mood of your question, it's important to be organized. Organize your life so that you know where you're going. Because when you know where you're going, then you tend to stay more focused. So around this time of year, if you come in my kutir, I've got those big Post-it notes all over my walls right now. Because around this time of year, near the end of the year, I start planning everything. I'm thinking about what are my priorities for 2025, and I'm writing them down. I'm getting my goals lined up. I'm looking at calendars. I'm saying, how's the year going to go? And what are the main points I'm going to hit for 2025? And then there's also a retrospective I'll do after that. How did it go in 2024? How did I do going towards my goals in 2024? Which things did I leave undone? How did I get distracted and things like that? If you have a planning system like that and you keep it clearly in front of your face, that what are my priorities? Oh, there it is. I already decided. It's up there on the top. For instance, one of my priorities is to remember Krishna at the time of death. That means I have to reshuffle whatever I'm doing. It's like, is this helping me get there? Because there can be, even in devotional service, some things that don't allow me to do my deep contemplation, and I'm being a little more scattered or unorganized in the way I'm doing it. Is it helping me have my mind in that state where Krishna says, yam yam vapi smaran bhavam. Don't get too distracted one way or another, just stay fixed on me. Things like that. Have your priorities lined up for the way you're going to act in the world, for the what quantity of things are you going to do in devotional service? You know, Sankhya Purva Kanama Gamanatibi. You know that verse? It's from Srinivasacharya. He wrote about the Goswamis, and he said, they counted everything. They lined it up. They had Post-it notes in there. They wrote it down. How many times am I going to chant the holy name every day this year? How many books am I going to read? Or how many books am I going to write? Sankhya Purvaka Nama Gana Natibi Kalavasani Krito. They had it all lined up. So that's another way to engage your intelligence, is to decide ahead of time, what am I going to do tomorrow? And then when you wake up, you hit the ground running because you know where you're going to go. It's hard to do because the mind says, no, I don't want to plan because I want to do whatever I want to do. But then you end up as a victim. And the mind just says, well, let's waste a little time because I'm not really going for anything and I don't want to commit. Most people don't want to commit. So just like you make a vow in initiation, say, I'm doing this. You can make a vow every day. It's like, this is what I'm going to do today. And then it gives you power over your mind. You've already decided when you're in the right state of mind that these are my goals for today. And then when the mind says, let's just be in the mode of ignorance today, say, that's fine. You can do that, but after you finish these things. And by the time you're engaged in those things, then your mind gets enlivened and say, oh, what was I thinking? I really did want to chant a chapter of Bhagavad Gita today, but I just didn't know it because of the influence of the mode of ignorance. So that's one way to use your intelligence, is to plan ahead. Beat your mind to the punch by using your intelligence. Go ahead.
A follow-up to that is, let's say you create a plan for the next day. You try to execute it, but you don't get even the first step done on that plan. Do you still execute the plan regardless, and then reflect at the end of the day that this plan is too difficult for me to do, and then
Yeah, you can reassess if you need to. And it takes a lot of strength, just like any discipline. It's these little decisions that you make. You may think, well, that's just a little decision. No, that's everything. It's in that moment where you say, I made a plan. I'm going to chant a chapter of Bhagavad Gita. That's a good idea. It's recommended by our acharyas. And then it comes time to do it and say, I have to check my social media first, right? And then if you're able to somehow or other develop a strength, say social media later, like way later, first I'll do this. And you get in that habit that first I do my Bhagavad Gita. That's when you start getting strong, is you develop those habits. Like physical body, I don't feel like going for a walk or doing a few push-ups or something like that. And say, that's all right, it's on my list. I'll just do it anyway because I already wrote it down. I already decided. And if you're not able to get it the first time, then you try to sneak up on it another way. Like maybe do half of what you thought and say, okay, today I'll do one verse. Because the mind can become so stubborn, like a donkey. They're like, come on, boy. And he's like, I won't move. It's like, how about just move one step? And so we have to become expert at coaxing the mind, like at least do something. Just because you can't do everything doesn't mean don't do anything. Try to do something. Oftentimes it breaks it open. And you end up sitting in the corner reading Bhagavad Gita till somebody comes in and goes, don't you want a light on in here? The sun went down. And then you realize you just had a big victory. And if you keep adding those victories up throughout your life, even though it's a battle with the mind, always, you start to get the upper hand. And there are other forces that come in that help you, not the least of which is Krishna, who notices your struggle. He actually starts to give you nectar. Everything comes from Krishna. And when he sees that in good faith, we're trying as hard as we can to hit our marks, he starts reciprocating in such a way that we can actually come to a level where we know for ourselves, I'm fixed now. I feel it. And we don't take it for granted, but we feel, okay, I've come to another level and I realize I don't feel sleepy. I actually want to hear this. I actually want to chant. I want to do my service. I want to improve it. And when we get on those, you can go for 10, 20, 30, 50 years and not even look up because you're so engaged. And then you look up and then some little notice comes, goes, oh, by the way, you have to leave your body now. And then you go like, all right, but I'm a little busy for that too. So just get on with it, So we want to be in that zone of, we want to find whatever way we can to get into that enterprise of devotional service and push the non-interested button in the material world. Okay?
Yes.
All right.
I just want to share something. So this is a conversation I had with my colleague, and he was mentioning that how he wanted to upskill in a certain direction, and that the skill was quite new to him. So he just told me that what I promised myself is I'll read one article a day or one paragraph a day, or just solve one question, like basically do one thing regarding that skill, and I'll not overcome it, but I'll make it make it very consistent. And over time, he saw that his progress was quite dramatic, and he was doing more and more of those activities which would help him upskill. and he became quite good at it. So when he told me the story, I thought if that could apply to learning material knowledge, how much more potent it can be to spirituality and Bhagavad Gita in general. So that was quite inspirational to me.
Yeah, that's a very helpful advice. Thank you. Any other topics, questions, thoughts? Yes.
So, when we are developing a new project, there might be so many things that we have to balance about with our sadhana. So how do we prioritize when we have to prioritize? So we know that sadhana is most important, chanting and reading. So how do we say no when there are multiple things to do? How can we say no to such services which may interfere with hearing and reading, or even cleaning the ashram, something like that?
Well, you have to do your services, and you also have to do your sadhana. And it's helpful to simplify things and find out what are the most basic things you have to cover in order to make progress. For instance, people who are interested in making financial progress, they figure out a simple formula. They don't get too fancy. Or people who are interested in developing physical health, they come up with a few things that are really important. Getting enough sleep, exercise, diet. There are 3 things. That's all you need, actually. Similarly with our sadhana, we should figure out what are the few things that I have to do in order to stay steady. And one thing is chanting, and the other one is reading. And if you can, during times when there are a lot of other things going on, revert to the basics. What are my foundation? You always win with basics. If you keep doing the most fun, find out what the fundamental principles are that are most effective, and keep doing those over and over again. And you just have to keep adjusting to that and make sure you're trending, and not become freaked out if you get to a point where, oh, I veered too much this way. You just adjust back. It's a complicated life, being a human, and also we have all these ambitions. Expand this, do that, millions of services going on. Plus we got this sadhana that we're doing every day. So just keep examining it and pull it back to where it's effective, and try to trim the places where you don't really need to expend extra time. Look out for time wasting things, or things that you could delegate to other people. Outsource, simplify, and delegate are 3 very important aspects of management. So you don't do everything yourself, work smarter, not harder. And you have to also set an example for yourself that my most important activity is my sadhana. It's like one of my godbrothers once told me when I was posing a similar question, because I knew he was also overwhelmed with various duties to do. He said, well, one thing is, to be effective in anything, you have to be blissful. And so make sure that you're doing those things that bring you to that point of feeling blissful. Otherwise, whenever things happen, then I'm not happy, because you're feeling guilty, or you're feeling out of balance, or you didn't get enough sleep, or any of those things. It's better to prioritize ahead of time and try to trim those things that don't allow you to finish what you need to finish. Slow and steady wins the race. And if you get too frenetic, you add too many things on, then you can get a little out of balance, and there can be over endeavor even in our spiritual, in our services. For instance, I mean, there's the admonitions, don't read too many books. What? I thought we were supposed to read all the time. And then Rupa Goswami says, don't be a bookworm. And so read what's important. You don't have to become so knowledgeable that you can show up everybody else that I know some other Shastra you didn't mention. Get versed first in the Bhagavad Gita, and then you don't have to worry about importing books from every part of the world. Assimilate what you have. That's a simple process. And just remember that the chanting of good rounds does everything else. And try to stay fixed in that. Generally, in ISKCON, nobody asks you how many things are you already doing. They just ask you, can you do this too? So you have to self-regulate. I've had that experience early on because, as I've said many times, in a darshan with Prabhupada, there were just a few of us there, and he said to us unequivocally and very sternly, you must also read my books. And in the era, during that era, it was around circa 1973, there was a heavy push for progress in book distribution and expansion and so forth. And I just remember encountering some parties that were pushing so hard all the time to hit new scores and so forth that they didn't take time to read. But I already knew Prabhupada said so sternly to us that you must read my books, not just sell them. I knew it was the right thing to do, so I had used my own initiative to say one way or another, I got to read Prabhupada's books every day because he told me to. And nobody else is going to keep a log of how much you're doing unless they're really on top of it. So you kind of have to self-regulate and make sure you don't get so overwhelmed with things you're trying to do next to expand that you forget to do your primary things. I could have just said that in one or two sentences, but that's the idea. Keep setting your priorities and say what's important. Otherwise, if you don't do it regularly, then there's mission creep and other kinds of things enter into your schedule. And then someday you find yourself overwhelmed. And then you have to reset. That's why I try to reset as often as I can, because I know when I'm clear about what's most important in every aspect of my life, body, mind, and spirit, I say, like, what are the main things I have to do in order to be solid? Then if I can stay in that mode, then I'm safer than if I just do whatever comes up. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you have to trim. You must also read the books. Probably that's how he said it. Like, he said, I read them just for, I did not write these just for selling. He said, I wrote them so that you could read them, become pure devotees, and go back to Godhead. That's exactly what he said. So it went in deeply and, try to balance it out. You don't have to boil the ocean. Just do what you can with what you have. One more question?
Yeah. Guru Maharaj, can you please give some practical tips on how to deal with stagnation or plateauing while trying to practice like the devotion service? There might be some thought like, okay, I'm doing this, but how do I avoid it becoming just routine and getting in the freshness in the practice itself every day? So how do I?
Yeah, it's such a good question. This principle of niyamagraha, just doing it for the sake of doing it. If you study what you're doing and look more deeply within it, then you tend to have more of your heart in it when you're doing it. For instance, when we were just in Govardhan, while I was doing my puja each morning, one of the devotees would come in and I'd ask them to read to me the word for word of all the things that we're doing. For instance, you read the word for word for the Gurvashtakam prayers, for the Agora Arti, for the Tulsi prayers. Somebody could go 20 years and sing Dina Krishna Dasi Ko. What does it mean? It's like, I don't know, but it sounds nice. But if you have a clearer idea of what you're actually singing, what you're praying for, by studying it, or even the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, it says in the Harinam Chintamani, or I should say, Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes through the voice of Haridas Thakur there, that he says, you have to have sambandha jnana along with your chanting. The two things go together. Otherwise, you can just chant mechanically. But if you study the holy name, something Krishna says to Uddhava in the 11th canto, he said, when you when you study a mantra, you purify it. It means you purify your intention for chanting it. So look into what you're doing. You don't have to do extra things. You don't have to go to some other sampradaya. All you have to do is figure out what you're doing now and apply yourself. I remember reading that in a book before I even joined Krishna consciousness. There was a book called Be Here Now, and the author said, so many people are practicing some spiritual thing, and he said, a lot of people around the world say grace before they eat. And he said, you don't have to change what you're doing, just remember why you're saying it in the first place. And that applies to our practices as well. When you're doing something routinely every single day, unless you look into it and discuss why you're doing it, what's the meaning of it, that it can become rote. So that's one way to help. Hare Krishna.
We
Yeah.
we can serve, because you have to go, we can serve prasad.
You want to serve prasadam?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll just say something about the prasadam prayer, and that's another thing to think about. I was just considering how poignant is the prayer we say before prasadam, and that's another thing we can just joyfully sing, which we should joyfully sing. But if we remember the importance of what we put in our mouths, I was thinking about when I was taking prasadam yesterday that I'm actually putting something in my mouth. That's kind of a big deal. It's a very intimate thing. Like that's my mouth. And if you're really conscious, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, that this is Krishna's kindness, that he gave us prasadam, which is the same as him. It's the same vibration to put in your mouth, and your tongue is analyzing it. And if you do it very consciously, that, oh my Lord, you're so kind, rather than me being a subject to the modes of nature and being a pig to eat dirty things, or to just be affected by karma so heavily that I'll eat things that are factually detestful and horrible, that cause ugra karma. I'm not forced. You're so kind, you gave me this alternative. And if I remember that when I put it in my mouth, when I'm taking prasadam, I'm honoring it and thinking, Krishna, you're so kind, thank you. And it's a very intimate experience, and I'm taking prasadam and I meditate on it, then that's an example of not getting caught in just rub-a-dub-dub, thanks for the grub, and then just eat. But very Prabhupada, as Shruti Kirti said, he used to he'd honor prasadam alone. And he'd sit facing a wall. So he was just there with the prasadam, and he would meditate on it when he was taking prasadam. So that's something important. Sharira Vijaja, Jodendriya Tahikaro, Subebele Vishashagare, Jeta Katina Shanshare, Krishna Baladoyamo, Vibhade Jivajoy, Thank you very much for having me over. Your ashram's beautiful. It's a highly desirable occupation to have a brahmachari ashram and to cultivate this sense of simplicity, that I only need service, place to lie down, a little prasadam, and a set of Bhagavatams in the corner, and I'm happy. And when you have that, then you have a basis for your life. Whatever you do throughout your life, then you know that I can always repair to the safety of being happy, just being a soul and being engaged in Krishna's service. So please keep up the great work and cultivate more. Plan to expand the ashram system here in Silicon Valley, so more and more devotees have the opportunity to have this experience. And then we have more warriors to go out to beat Mayapur. Hare Krishna. Mantragol Virishta, Kripa Sindhave, and we really do have to beat Mayapur. I'm not joking around. That's our next thing. We want statistical analysis. We want it on the wall. We want to have a clear plan of what it's going to take, and we'll do whatever it takes to develop the infrastructure, to bring in more devotees, to calculate how we're going to apportion our energy, because it's not just for the sake of winning or anything like that. It's for the sake of showing that from wherever you are, if you really want to do it, you can organize in any type of community. It's not dependent on what kind of community you're in, but you can come to a much higher level. So we have to be number one in the world. Understand? Okay. Hare Krishna.
Vaisesika Maharaj
Ki jai.